a werewolf romance audiobook. The smell of lemon-scented furniture polish clung to Annabel Reynolds's skin like a second coat, as she worked her way through the vast, echoing great room of the Miles estate. Early autumn light, cool and judgmental, filtered through floor-to-ceiling obsidian windows, casting long, sharp shadows across the polished onyx floor tiles that she'd spent the previous hour buffing to a mirror shine. Her shoulders ached, her lungs burned, but she couldn't afford to slow down. Not here. Not when he, the Alpha King, Ryan Miles, could return at any moment from his latest territorial patrol. 6 months she'd been working here, invisible to everyone except when they needed something scrubbed or mended. 6 months of keeping her head down, her voice soft, her existence minimal. 6 months of praying that her human scent was diluted enough by chemicals that the most powerful werewolf in the region would never register her presence. Or worse, remember her history. She wiped the sweat from her brow with the back of her hand, the coarse fabric of her maid's uniform scratching her skin, and tried to ignore the framed photographs lining the massive stone mantelpiece. They told the sanitized story of a powerful man's reign. Treaties signed with rival territories, charity galas, handshakes with governors, a carefully crafted public image that hid the cold, raw power of the werewolf beneath the tailored suits. Ryan Miles wasn't just a successful businessman. He was the apex predator, the unforgiving Alpha King who ruled this territory and the thousands of shifters within it. "Mama, look what I found." Annabel's heart didn't just leap, it plummeted, slamming against her ribs with the force of a desperate creature trapped in a cage. She watched Grace come bounding into the room, her dark, wild curls bouncing with each step. At 4 years old, she was the heartbreaking spitting image of her father. The intense, startling blue eyes, the sharp, perfect line of her jaw, the aura of barely contained energy. Though Grace was a pup, she looked entirely human, and Annabel was determined to keep it that way. "Sweetie, I told you to stay in the playroom," Annabel whispered, sinking to her knees, matching her daughter's level. The head maid, a stern woman, had taken pity on Annabel when she learned she was a single human mother, and allowed Grace to stay in the distant staff quarters playroom on days when Annabel's meager babysitting fell through. Today was one of those days. "Is he the man in all the pictures?" Grace asked, her small hand pointing toward the mantelpiece Annabel had been studiously avoiding. "Yes," Annabel replied, her voice catching, feeling suddenly cold despite the warm air circulating through the massive room. "But he's very busy and important. We need to stay out of his way." A low, vibrating rumble that felt more like a shift in air pressure than a sound made Annabel's blood run icy. The sound of heavy tires grinding on the perimeter gravel meant he was here. The Alpha was home. Annabel grabbed Grace's hand and hurried toward the service corridor, but Grace's little shoelace had come undone. As Grace bent to fix it, a small, worn, stuffed rabbit, the one she must have been coming to show Annabel, tumbled from her grasp and rolled across the gleaming floor. It came to rest directly in the path leading from the imposing main front door to the central, curving staircase. "Hurry, Grace, please hurry," Annabel urged, her voice tight with rising panic. But it was too late. The massive, carved oak door swung open, and the air in the room changed instantly. It wasn't just a drop in barometric pressure, it was a shift in primal energy. The scent of cold metal and rain-soaked fur, the residual energy of the shifting and the power of the high-ranked pack members, flooded Annabel's senses. She kept her eyes fixed on the floor as heavy, bespoke leather boots entered, followed by the lighter steps of what she knew was his human security detail and his closest beta. One set of footsteps stopped. Annabel didn't need to look up to know. He had spotted the toy. "Sir, about the meeting with the Northern Pack," a man's voice began. Later came the reply. It was that voice, deep, resonating and laced with an inherent authority that Annabel had once found thrilling and now found terrifying. The voice that had whispered empty promises against her skin 5 years ago. Annabel dared to glance up just as Ryan Miles, impeccable in a charcoal suit that seemed to strain against the muscle beneath, bent to pick up the rabbit. His dark hair was shorter, disciplined, and silver was now touching his temples, but everything else was the same. The broad shoulders, the dominant jaw, the aura of barely contained alpha power that seemed to electrify the very atoms around him. "I wasn't aware we had children in the house," he stated, his voice flat to no one in particular. His eyes scanned the room, a quick, dismissive sweep that registered her, just another part of the domestic service, and then moved to Grace clutching Annabel's uniform. Annabel thought they had escaped notice. Then the shift happened. Ryan's eyes narrowed, not in recognition, but in instinct. Annabel saw his nostrils flare almost imperceptibly as he inhaled a deep breath. His gaze stopped on Grace, specifically on the little girl's dark curls and bright, startling blue eyes. His alpha instinct, honed over decades, was telling him something. Then, like a compass finding its true magnetic north, his eyes snapped back to Annabel's face. Annabel watched as his expression shifted, morphing from casual indifference to stunned, predatory recognition. 5 years of fear, struggle, and motherhood had changed her, replacing the soft curves of youth with a sharper edge, but it wasn't enough to hide the girl he had known. Annabel. The name fell from his lips like a guttural question, a raw, primal noise that belonged more to the forest than to this polished room. Annabel's heart hammered against her ribs, the sound a frantic drum in the sudden silence. She tightened her grip on Grace's hand. "Mr. Miles," she replied, her voice mechanical and soft, her eyes now glued to his expensive boots. "Everyone out," he ordered, his voice deceptively calm, the single word carrying such absolute, cold authority that his security detail and Beta immediately backed away, closing the massive door behind them. The silence was deafening, the only sound the frantic blood pounding in Annabel's ears. She could feel his eyes on her, cataloging every detail of the transformation. The uniform, the fear, the life of a runaway human. "Mama, who is that man?" Grace's voice was small but curious, tugging at Annabel's hand as she peered up at the stranger who was, unknowingly, her father. Annabel watched as Ryan's gaze dropped back to Grace. Annabel saw multiple emotions cross his face: shock, calculation, confusion, but the way his eyes widened fractionally as he took in her features, the shade of her eyes, the shape of her jaw, the dimple that matched his own, told Annabel he was putting the pieces together. Then he took a deep, shuddering inhale, and the last piece clicked into place. Annabel knew, with chilling certainty, that he had just registered the subtle, deep scent of his own bloodline on the child. "How old is she?" he asked quietly, his voice now rough, still staring at Grace. "4," Annabel managed, her voice barely audible. "Her name is Grace." Ryan's jaw tightened, and the hand holding the stuffed rabbit clenched so hard Annabel saw his knuckles turn white before he regained control. He crouched down, his movement slow and deliberate, lowering himself until he was at Grace's eye level, the Alpha King bowing before his pup. "Hello, Grace, this must be yours." He held out the rabbit. Grace nodded, suddenly shy, pressing against Annabel's leg but reaching for her toy. "Thank you, Mr. Dom," she whispered. Annabel felt the air leave her lungs. Mr. Dom. Grace had picked up the diminutive from the staff or the younger children. When the Alpha's large fingers briefly touched the pup's tiny ones during the exchange, Annabel felt a primal, terrible pressure, as though all the oxygen had been sucked from the room. It was their first contact, Father and daughter, alpha and pup. A moment Annabel had both dreaded and in her deepest, weakest hours longed for. Annabel, my office now. The gentle tone he had used with Grace vanished, replaced by an unbreakable, cold alpha command. He rose, towering over them, buttoning his jacket in a smooth motion that emphasized the vast, devastating difference between their current stations in life. Head maid can watch Grace. As if summoned by the mention of her title, the older woman appeared instantly. "Of course, Mr. Miles. Come along, dear," the head maid said, holding out her hand to Grace. Grace looked up at Annabel, uncertain. "It's okay, sweetie. I'll be back soon," Annabel assured her, though she wasn't certain of anything anymore. With visible reluctance, Grace took the head maid's hand, casting curious glances back at Ryan as she was led away. The moment they were alone, Ryan turned away without a word, striding toward his private study with the expectation that Annabel would follow. And she did, because what choice did a human maid have when the Alpha King issued a command? The sound of the heavy, reinforced oak door shutting behind them was final. It sounded like a prison cell locking. Chapter 2, The Alpha Command. Ryan's private study was exactly as Annabel remembered from her terrifying glimpse years ago. Dark wood, shelves lined with heavy, leather-bound texts on law and territorial rights, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sprawling, manicured gardens, and a massive mahogany desk that served as both workspace and a stark reminder of the power imbalance between them. He didn't sit. Instead, he walked to a polished sideboard and poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, his back to her, the rigid set of his shoulders speaking volumes. Annabel remained standing just inside the door, hands clasped tightly before her, wondering if she could reach the handle before his alpha speed could stop her, wondering if she should grab Grace and try to run again. When he finally turned to face her, his expression was carefully, brutally controlled. But his eyes, those intense, cold blue eyes that Grace had inherited, burned with an intensity that made Annabel shiver. 5 years, he said, each word precisely measured. 5 years, Annabel. You disappear without a trace, and now you show up in my house as my maid. A sharp, humorless laugh escaped him. With my pup. Annabel flinched at the word pup. It was a formal claim, a biological declaration. "I needed a job," Annabel replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. "I used my mother's maiden name. I didn't know you'd be here, Mr. Miles. Your travel schedule." "Don't," he cut her off, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't insult my intelligence. You knew exactly who owned this territory, who ruled these walls." Annabel swallowed hard. "I needed the money. This was the best-paying position I could find, with my limited resume and my desire for anonymity. I never intended for you to see us." "That much is obvious." He took a measured sip of his drink. "Were you ever going to tell me I had a daughter, a pup of my blood?" The question hung in the air between them like a live, electrified wire. Annabel thought of all the reasons she'd run. The night she'd accidentally seen the real nature of his business, the terrifying, raw display of his first full shift, the way he'd coldly ordered the man to be broken, the fear that had driven her to flee the moment she realized she was carrying his child, carrying the werewolf blood that would tie her forever to the supernatural world. "No," she admitted, finding a sliver of courage. "I was." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes, a flicker of yellow Annabel recognized. He set his glass down with deliberate care. "You stole 4 years of her life from me. 4 years of her first scent, her first growl, her first shift." "I protected her," Annabel countered, stepping forward despite the warning in her human instincts. "From what? From me?" He moved toward her then, each step measured and predatory. "From the father who would have given her every advantage, Who would have ensured she wanted for nothing? From your world, Annabel said, forcing herself to stand her ground even as his scent, smoke, alpha musk, and ancient spice washed over her. From what you do, from what you are. He stopped mere inches from her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back sharply to maintain eye contact. And what am I, Annabel? His voice had dropped to a near whisper, laced with a terrifying challenge. You're dangerous, she whispered back, her heart pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. I saw enough that night. I know what happens to people who cross you, people who see what they shouldn't see. A muscle ticked in his jaw, but his expression remained carefully unreadable. Yet here you are, in my home, the one person who's crossed me more than anyone, right down to hiding my heir. Fear bloomed in Annabel's chest, sharp and cold, but she thought of Grace and stood taller. If you're going to threaten me, just do it. Threaten you? He looked almost offended. You're the mother of my pup, a child I just learned about 5 minutes ago. His hand shot out, not to strike her, as she'd instinctively feared, but to grasp her chin, tilting her face up to his. His touch was gentle but unyielding. A child you hid from the Alpha King for years, he corrected, his eyes searching hers, piercing her human resolve. My pup, Annabel, mine. The possessiveness in his tone sent a familiar, treacherous shiver down her spine, not entirely from fear, and that terrifying feeling galvanized her. What are you going to do? She asked, barely able to get the words out. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, a gesture so intimate it stole her breath. First, I'm going to get to know my daughter, my pup, he said softly. And then, Annabel, we're going to discuss exactly how you're going to make up for the time you've stolen from us. He released her and stepped back, his expression shifting to something more businesslike. You'll move out of the staff quarters today, both of you. There are suitable rooms in the Alpha Wing. I'm not quitting my job, Annabel protested, desperate to maintain some semblance of control. We're not moving in with you. His smile was slow and utterly predatory. You already live here, Annabel, but from now on, you'll do so as the mother of my child, not as someone who cleans my floors. He returned to his desk, picking up his phone. I'll have your meager belongings moved while we have lunch. I haven't agreed to anything, Annabel protested. He looked up, and the cold intensity in his eyes made it clear that her agreement was irrelevant. You've kept my blood from me for 4 years. Consider this me being generous. She seems well cared for, happy. She is, Annabel said, a mother's pride momentarily overriding her fear. Good, he nodded once, decisively. That's the only reason I'm being civilized about this, Annabel. Don't mistake it for forgiveness. As Annabel stood there, caught between the locked door and the Alpha King she'd fled from years ago, she realized she'd made a catastrophic miscalculation. She'd gambled that Ryan Miles would never notice one more low-ranking human maid in his massive estate. She'd lost, and now she was trapped, the very air she breathed controlled by a man who collected debts with interest, who never forgot a betrayal, and who had just discovered the existence of his heir. What terrified her most wasn't the anger simmering beneath his controlled exterior. It was the look in his eyes when he'd first sensed Grace, a look of wonder, primal possession, and absolute, crushing determination. Ryan Miles had found something he considered his. And Annabel knew with bone-deep certainty that he would never let either of them go again. Chapter 3. The Dinner of Justification. Annabel followed Ryan through the winding, silent corridors of the mansion, her mind a frantic, human scramble of exit strategies. The lunch he'd invited her to wasn't an invitation at all. It was a command performance. When they reached the sunroom, she found Grace already perched on a cushioned window seat, surrounded by coloring books and crayons that hadn't been there an hour ago. The head maid stood nearby, Her usually stern face softened slightly as she watched Grace. "Thank you, head maid," Ryan said, dismissing her with a curt nod. "That will be all for now." The older woman hesitated, glancing between Ryan and Annabel with undisguised curiosity before departing. "Mama, look!" Grace looked up with a bright smile that faltered slightly when she noticed Ryan. "Look what the head maid gave me." She held up a coloring book featuring elaborate royal castles. "That's lovely, sweetie," Annabel said, moving to her side instinctively, placing her human body between Grace and the Alpha King. A futile gesture, but maternal instinct overrode logic. "Do you like princesses, Grace?" Ryan asked, his voice gentler than Annabel had ever heard it, his tone shifting automatically for the pup. She nodded shyly. "I like the ones that fight dragons." Something that might have been a smile, genuine, unguarded, touched Ryan's lips. "A warrior princess. I approve." He gestured toward the table where an elaborate lunch had been set, featuring a stark white linen tablecloth and silver cutlery. "Are you hungry? The chef has prepared something special." Grace looked to Annabel for permission, and Annabel nodded, helping her down. As Grace skipped to the table, Annabel felt Ryan's presence at her shoulder. "She has your scent of vanilla and fear," he murmured, so only Annabel could hear. "And my stubbornness, I suspect." "She has your eyes," Annabel replied before she could stop herself. "And your dimple." The acknowledgement seemed to please him. His hand brushed the small of her back as he guided her to the table, a possessive gesture that sent an unwanted, electrical warmth through her. She jerked away, earning a narrowed glance from him, but he said nothing as they joined Grace. Lunch was surreal. Ryan asked Grace questions about her favorite colors, her favorite animals, and the stories she liked, building a mental catalog of the pup he'd just discovered. Annabel watched him transform before her eyes from the ruthless alpha she knew into a father trying desperately to make a connection. It was disconcerting how natural he seemed, how quickly Grace warmed to him. "Mr. Dom has a training den, Mama," Grace informed her excitedly between bites of her gourmet grilled cheese. "Can I shift in it someday?" Before Annabel could answer, Ryan said, "Of course you can, Princess, any time you want." He turned to Annabel. "Does she know how to shift?" "No," Annabel admitted, anger flaring. "She's only 4 and I'm human. Teaching her was beyond my ability. Lessons weren't in our budget." Something sharp flashed in his eyes, anger, but not directed at her. "That will change immediately. I'll arrange for a beta instructor." "Ryan." "It's decided, Annabel." The firmness in his voice brooked no argument. He turned back to Grace with a softer expression. "Would you like that? To learn to run with the pack?" Her enthusiastic nod made him smile. A rare, genuine smile that transformed his features, making him look younger, more like the man Annabel had fallen for 5 years ago before she'd known what lay beneath the charming exterior. After lunch, Ryan's beta, a tall, silent man, appeared at the doorway. "Sir, your 200 with the council is waiting." Ryan nodded, rising from his seat. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." To Annabel, he said, "Take the afternoon to get settled in your new rooms. The head maid will show you the way when you're ready." Annabel opened her mouth to protest again, but he silenced her with a look. "Not in front of Grace," he warned quietly. Then, to his daughter, he crouched down and said, "I have to go to a meeting now, but I'll see you at dinner, okay?" "Okay, Mr. Dom," she replied, surprising Annabel with a small wave goodbye. "You can call me Ryan, or just Dom if you like," he told her with a wink before straightening and fixing Annabel with a pointed look. "We'll talk later, just you and me, and we will discuss the past." The threat, or promise, hung in the air as he left. Chapter 4: The Truth of the Shift. At 5 minutes to 7, Annabel made her way to the main dining room, her heart pounding with each step. Two of Ryan's closest guards, shifters both, stood in the hallway outside, nodding respectfully as she approached. The implied message was clear. She might be receiving preferential treatment, but she was still a prisoner. Ryan was already waiting, standing by one of the tall windows with a glass of rich, dark red wine in hand. He had changed into a crisp white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms and dark trousers. His scent was sharper now, less controlled, hinting at the difficult meeting he'd just left. "Annabel," he said, his voice low, "you look lovely, even in that plain dress." "Don't patronize me," Annabel replied, remaining by the door. "We both know I'm underdressed for whatever this is." A slight smile curved his lips. "You misunderstand. The dress is forgettable. You are lovely." He crossed to a side table and poured a second glass. "The head maid mentioned you were resistant to the wardrobe I arranged." "I don't need your charity." "It isn't charity," he approached, offering her the wine. When she didn't take it, he set it on the table near her. "It's practical. You're no longer a maid, Annabel. You're the mother of my pup. Your appearance reflects on both of us and on Grace. As a human partner to the Alpha King, you need to look the part when you attend certain pack functions." "Is that what this dinner is about? Laying out your rules?" She gestured to the elaborate table setting. "Explaining how I'm supposed to behave now that you've decided to acknowledge us." His expression hardened. "You're angry, I understand that, but let's be clear about who created this situation." He gestured for her to take a seat, and after a moment's hesitation, she did. He took the chair at the head of the table, close to hers. "You could have told me about Grace. You chose to run instead." "I had my reasons," Annabel said, finally reaching for the wine. She needed something to steady her human nerves. "Yes, you mentioned that night." His tone was dangerously calm. "What exactly did you see that night, Annabel, that made you run with my blood in your belly?" Annabel met his gaze directly. "Enough to know what kind of alpha you really are." He leaned forward slightly. "And what kind is that?" "The kind who transforms into something terrifying, covered in gore, and gives orders that break another shifter entirely. The kind who lives by a different set of rules than the rest of us. Rules I don't want Grace to be governed by." She gripped the stem of her wine glass tightly. "You're not wrong," he admitted after a pause, surprising her with his candor. "But you're not entirely right either." A uniformed server, a silent, older human woman, appeared, bringing the first course, an artfully arranged salad Annabel had no appetite for. They remained silent until the server departed. "The man you saw that night," Ryan continued once they were alone, his eyes holding hers, "was a beta named Torvin. He had violated the sacred oath of the pack. He had trafficked young, vulnerable Omegas across our territory lines, using my name as cover." Ryan's voice remained steady, but Annabel could see the cold, raw fury in his eyes. "He got exactly what he deserved. The law, human or shifter, wouldn't have touched him. I was enforcing the Alpha Code. I was doing what I must to protect the weakest members of this pack." Annabel stared at him, caught off guard by this justification, which mirrored the one in her fragmented memory. "So, you're what? Some kind of vigilante alpha, taking out pack traitors the law can't touch." A humorless smile touched his lips. "Hardly. I'm the Alpha King. I am the law, and I have ethical boundaries, lines I won't cross, lines I punish others for crossing. And that makes everything okay. You decide who deserves punishment, and that gives you the right to deliver it." "I didn't say it makes it okay. I said it's what happened." He took a sip of wine. "Would it have made a difference if you'd known why that man was being punished? That my shift and my ensuing rage were targeted to protect children?" Annabel considered the question honestly. Maybe. I don't know. I was 22, Ryan. I'd never seen violence like that, supernatural violence, before. I barely knew you were even a werewolf. And now I'm a mother. My priorities have changed. She set her glass down carefully. Which brings us to why we're here. What exactly do you expect from me? From us? What I expect, he said after the server departed again, is for my pup to grow up knowing her father. For her to have every advantage, every opportunity, every bit of protection I can provide. And for her mother to be treated with the respect she deserves as the woman who gave me a child. And if that's not what I want, if I want to leave. His expression darkened, and the yellow flicker returned to his eyes. You won't take my pup from me again, Annabel. That's non-negotiable. She doesn't know you, Annabel said, desperation creeping into her voice. I'm all she's ever had because you chose that for her, he countered, his tone sharpening. But I'm not a monster. I'm not going to separate you. Grace needs her mother. His eyes met hers, intense and uncompromising. Which means you stay, too. As what? Your prisoner, your mate. The word hung unspoken. He set his fork down with deliberate care. As Grace's mother, as to our personal relationship, that depends entirely on you. There is no personal relationship, I said quickly, too quickly. Something like amusement flickered across his face. We have a child together, a pup. That's about as personal as it gets. He leaned back in his chair, studying her. But if you're referring to other aspects, I won't force anything on you. I never have. So, what happens now? Annabel asked, pushing her barely touched food away. Now we find a way forward, for Grace's sake. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers before she could pull away. I've missed 4 years of her life, Annabel. I don't intend to miss any more. The intensity in his voice, the genuine regret in his eyes, caught Annabel off guard. This wasn't just about possession or control. He truly wanted to know his daughter. And what about your alpha business? Annabel asked carefully. Will she be exposed to the violence of your pack life? Never, he said immediately, with such conviction that Annabel almost believed him. That part of my world will never touch her, or you. Your security watched me all afternoon, Annabel pointed out. I'm sure they'll continue to do so. How is that keeping us separated from your world? They're shifters. They're here to protect you, not monitor you, he countered. You'd be surprised how many enemies I've made over the years. Rogues, territorial rivals, people who might use you or Grace to get to me. The thought sent a chill down Annabel's human spine. Is that supposed to reassure me? It's supposed to be honest. He stood, coming around to her side of the table. Come, there's something I want to show you. Wearily, Annabel followed him from the dining room, her mind filled with the terrifying image of his wolf form, the fear of his world, and the dawning realization that her fight might be hopeless. Chapter 5. The Tracking Revelation. Ryan led Annabel through a hidden passage behind a bookcase, eventually arriving at a room she hadn't entered during her time as the maid, his private study. Unlike the formal office, this space felt more personal. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with volumes ranging from classics to modern fiction. Ryan crossed to the desk and unlocked a drawer, removing a slim folder which he handed to Annabel. Open it, he said quietly. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Annabel 5 years ago laughing with friends outside the frame. Annabel stepping out of her apartment building. Annabel shopping in a market. Then, pictures that made her gasp. Annabel with a visibly pregnant belly, her hand resting protectively over it. You had me tracked, Annabel whispered, horror and betrayal washing over her. After you disappeared, yes. He didn't look apologetic. I thought you'd been taken. I thought someone had hurt you to get to me. My instincts were screaming you were still alive. But I couldn't find your scent. You were worried about me. Of course I was. Frustration edged his voice. I loved you, Annabel. When you vanished, I tore this territory apart looking for you. My best trackers, my best magic users. I loved you. The past tense wasn't lost on her. Loved, not love. For how long? Annabel asked, unable to stop herself from flipping through the photos. 6 months, he replied, until my investigators tracked you and your scent profile to Chicago. By then you were, his jaw tightened. I saw the photos, you were pregnant, visibly so. Annabel froze, staring at a picture of herself in a coffee shop. You knew I was pregnant. I suspected it was mine, he said, his voice controlled but with an undercurrent of anger. But I wasn't certain. You'd been gone almost 4 months when I found you. It could have been someone else. There was never anyone else. Something flashed in his eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps. I considered confronting you then, demanding answers. He moved to the window, looking out at the darkened gardens. But you clearly didn't want to be found. You'd gone to considerable lengths to cloak your scent and escape my influence, so I let you think you were free. So you just let me go. Annabel couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. I let you think you were free, he corrected. But I never stopped watching over you, Annabel. Never. My people still received regular reports. I knew when you moved back to the city 6 months ago. I knew when you applied for the position here. The folder slipped from Annabel's fingers, photographs scattering across the polished floor. You knew I was here all this time, from the moment the head maid forwarded your application. I approved your hearing personally. Annabel's mind reeled with the implications. You've been playing me for 6 months. You've been watching my pup grow. Learning who she is from a distance. Learning who you've become. Why the charade? Annabel demanded, anger rising through her shock. Why pretend you didn't know we were here? I wanted to see what you would do, he admitted, crossing the room to stand before her. Whether you would tell me about Grace on your own. My confrontation today was an act of impatience, not surprise. But my reaction to sensing her, to seeing you, that was genuine. You've been manipulating me from the start, Annabel said bitterly. I prefer to think of it as giving you enough rope to hang yourself, he said, his smile holding no warmth. But yes, I orchestrated your employment here. I wanted you close where I could scent you both, close enough where my pack could protect you. Protect or control, she challenged. His smile disappeared. Is there a difference? The casual admission sent a chill through her. This was the real alpha King Ryan Miles, the man who arranged people's lives like pieces on a chessboard. I want to see Grace, Annabel said suddenly, needing to escape this room, this conversation, and the unsettling, powerful effect he still had on her. Of course, he gestured toward the door. I'll take you to her. They walked in tense silence through the mansion. As they passed a large window overlooking the back gardens, a flash of lightning illuminated the grounds, followed seconds later by a low rumble of thunder. She's afraid of thunderstorms, Annabel said, more to herself than to Ryan. He glanced at her sharply. I should know these things. Her fears, her favorite foods, her first words. These are things an alpha father should know. For the first time, Annabel glimpsed the true cost of her flight, years of missed milestones. Her first word was moon, Annabel found herself saying. She was obsessed with it when she was little, used to cry when clouds covered it up. Ryan absorbed this information like a man dying of thirst. What else? Does her pup's strength show yet? What's her dominant scent? She's allergic to strawberries. She loves dogs but is afraid of loud, sudden sounds. She started walking at 10 months and hasn't slowed down since. Her scent, it's faint, but she smells like wet cedar and clover. With each detail, his expression softened, the hard lines of anger giving way to something more vulnerable. It was disarming to see this side of him, the father hungry for knowledge about his pup. Another crash of thunder, closer now, interrupted the moment. They quickened their pace, reaching the kitchen where the head maid had taken Grace for dinner. Chapter 6: The Storm and the Bond. Through the doorway, Annabel could see Grace sitting at the kitchen island with two other children, a boy and a girl, both with dark hair and the intense blue eyes of high-ranking shifters. "Uncle Ryan," the boy called out when he spotted Ryan, "are you staying to watch the storm with us?" Ryan's entire demeanor changed as he entered the kitchen, his posture relaxing, his expression warming into a genuine smile. "Not tonight, Mitchell. I have some work to finish, but I see you've met Grace." The boy nodded enthusiastically. "She's cool. She likes dragons, too." Grace beamed, but her smile faltered as thunder boomed again, rattling the reinforced windows. She slipped off her stool and ran to Annabel, wrapping her arms around her legs. "It's okay, sweetie," Annabel soothed, lifting her into her arms. "It's just a storm, it can't hurt you." "It's too loud," Grace whispered against Annabel's neck, her small body trembling slightly. Ryan watched them, a strange expression on his face. Longing, perhaps, or envy at the easy comfort between human mother and pup. "You know," he said, addressing Grace directly, "this house has been here for over 200 years, and not once has it ever been damaged by a storm." He stepped closer, his voice gentle, infused with a low, calming alpha rumble. "Would you like to see something special? Something that might make the thunder less scary?" Grace peered at him cautiously from the safety of Annabel's arms. After a moment's consideration, she nodded. "Good pup," he said with an encouraging smile. "Let's get your friends, too." The two other children eagerly jumped down from their stools, clearly used to following their uncle's lead. Ryan led them through corridors Annabel hadn't explored, up a winding staircase to what appeared to be a tower room. The circular space was dominated by windows on all sides, offering a panoramic view of the storm-lashed grounds. Rain hammered against the glass, and lightning flashed across the sky. "This was my favorite place when I was a boy," Ryan said, flipping a switch that activated subtle lighting around the perimeter of the room. "My father used to bring me up here during storms. He said it was better to watch them than to hide from them." Grace clung tighter to Annabel as thunder rumbled again, but her fear was now mingled with curiosity. "It's so high up," she whispered. "The highest point of the house," Ryan confirmed. "The perfect place for storm watching." He gestured to a collection of cushions and throws arranged on a circular bench. "Make yourselves comfortable." Annabel sat with Grace on her lap, her back against her chest, so she could see the spectacle outside. Ryan remained standing, his tall frame silhouetted against the stormy sky. "Watch for it," he told the children. "The lightning comes first, then you count until you hear the thunder. The higher the count, the further away the storm is." A brilliant fork of lightning split the darkness. Ryan began counting aloud, joined by his niece and nephew. 1, 2, 3. They reached 7 before thunder rolled across the sky. 7 seconds, he explained. "That means the storm is about 7 miles away. Let's watch and see if it gets closer or moves away." For the next half hour, they sat in the tower room, counting the seconds between lightning and thunder. Gradually, Grace's fear receded, replaced by the scientific fascination of a 4-year-old. She slipped from Annabel's lap to join the other children at the windows. Ryan sat beside Annabel, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body, but not touching. "My father did this for Monica and me during every storm," he said quietly, his eyes on the children. It became a family tradition. You never mentioned your family when we were together, Annabel observed, equally quiet. They were complicated topics, still are. Your sister is married, Monica, right? He nodded. 9 years now. Mitchell and Claire are her children. She married a good man, a human financier. The emphasis on human didn't escape me. Does she know what you do? She knows enough to keep her distance from certain aspects of my life. He turned to look at Annabel directly. Much as you will. Before Annabel could respond, Grace came bounding back to them, her fear of the storm apparently forgotten. Mama, did you see that big lightning? We only counted to 4 this time. The storm is getting closer, Annabel murmured. Uncle Ryan, Claire called from the window. Can we have hot chocolate? You always make hot chocolate during storms. Ryan smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile. Of course, we can. Why don't you and Mitchell go down to the kitchen and ask the head maid to prepare it? We'll be right behind you. The 2 older children raced from the room. Grace looked torn, clearly wanting to follow her new friends, but unwilling to leave Annabel's side. You can go with them if you want, Annabel told her. The head maid will look after you. She hesitated, looking between Annabel and Ryan. Will you come too, Mama? In a minute, sweetheart. I need to talk to your father for a moment. The word felt strange on Annabel's tongue. Father, but Ryan's sharp intake of breath told her he'd noticed. Once Grace had departed, trailing reluctantly after the older children, Annabel and Ryan were left alone in the tower room, the storm raging around them. You're good with them, Annabel said, breaking the silence. Children are straightforward, he shrugged, but the compliment pleased him. They don't play games or hide their feelings, they just are. Unlike adults, the implication hung between them. I need to know what happens next, Annabel said, turning to face him fully. You've orchestrated this whole situation, brought us into your home, declared yourself Grace's father. What's the end game, Ryan? He considered her for a long moment, his face partially illuminated by a flash of lightning. There is no end game, Annabel. There's just life, our life together, raising our pup. You make it sound so simple. It can be, he insisted, leaning forward. You, me, Grace, a family. I can give her everything, Annabel. Everything I never had growing up. A stable pack home, the best education, opportunities most humans and shifters can't even imagine. And what about the other side of your life? The part that sent me running 5 years ago. His expression hardened. That part stays separate. I've built walls between my worlds for a reason. Walls have a way of crumbling, Annabel countered. What happens when those worlds collide? When a rogue or a rival alpha decides to use your daughter, your mate, against you? That won't happen, he said with such cold certainty that Annabel almost believed him. You can't guarantee that. No one could. He moved closer, his knee brushing hers. What I can guarantee is that anyone who tried would regret it deeply. I protect what's mine, Annabel, always. The possessiveness in his tone should have repelled her. Instead, it sent a treacherous warmth through her veins, the primitive appeal of absolute protection. We're not yours, Annabel said, but the protest sounded weak even to her own ears. His hand came up to touch her face, fingers tracing her jawline with surprising gentleness. Aren't you? Before Annabel could answer, the door burst open and Grace appeared, tears streaming down her face. Mama, she cried, launching herself into Annabel's arms. The thunder is too loud. I'm here, baby, I've got you, Annabel soothed. Ryan rose, giving them space, but Grace surprised Annabel by reaching for him with one hand, keeping the other firmly wrapped in Annabel's uniform. You, too, she demanded through her tears. You said storms can't hurt us in this house. A complex emotion crossed Ryan's face. Surprise, tenderness, and something deeper Annabel couldn't name. Carefully, he crouched beside them, his large hand engulfing Grace's tiny one. That's right, Princess, he said softly, his voice full of the low, soothing alpha rumble that had quieted the pack for generations. Nothing can hurt you here, not while I'm around. His eyes met Annabel's over their daughter's head, and she saw the unspoken promise there, not just to Grace, but to her as well. Whether Annabel wanted it or not, Ryan Miles had claimed them both, drawing them into his orbit with a gravitational pull. Annabel wasn't sure she had the strength to resist. Chapter 7, A Sister's Warning. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Annabel had insisted on sleeping in Grace's room, her small pup body curled against her mother's side. Annabel had lain awake for hours, wrestling with the implications of Ryan's revelations and the unexpected, terrifying tenderness he had shown his daughter. A soft, insistent knock came at the bedroom door. Annabel disentangled herself from Grace, padding across the plush carpet. She opened the door to find a striking woman with dark hair swept into an elegant updo, her scent sharp and confident, a high-ranking beta, possibly even a Luna. Ms. Reynolds, the woman inquired with a slight accent. I'm Monica Miles-Richie, Ryan's sister. Annabel's breath caught. I wasn't expecting visitors. Her smile was polite, but assessing. I imagine there are many things you weren't expecting when you took a maid position in my brother's household. She glanced past Annabel to where Grace slept peacefully in the massive canopy bed. May I come in? Or perhaps we could speak in the sitting room. The sitting room would be better, Annabel agreed, pulling on the simple but expensive cream blouse Ryan had provided. She found Monica seated gracefully by the window, sunlight highlighting the similarities between her features and her brother's. Dominic mentioned you knew each other before. 5 years ago, was it? Monica asked, her gaze direct. We dated briefly. It ended abruptly. When you discovered you were pregnant with his pup, Monica stated, not a question. When I discovered certain things about his alpha enforcement and what he truly was, Annabel corrected, unwilling to let Monica dictate the narrative. The pregnancy came later. Something like respect flickered in Monica's blue eyes. I see, and now you've returned with his daughter to work as his maid. An interesting choice. I needed a job. The position paid well, and I had limited options and limited qualifications, I imagine. I imagine so, Monica murmured. Ryan tells me you were studying art history before you left. You never completed your degree. No, I didn't. A shame. Education opens so many doors. Having a pup to support closes just as many, I replied, unable to keep the edge from her voice. On that, we agree. Monica's expression softened slightly. My own children have advantages many don't, but I've tried to ensure they understand that privilege comes with responsibility. Is that why you've come? To evaluate whether I've raised the alpha's pup properly? A slight smile curved her lips. Partly, but mostly, I came to see the woman who managed what no one else has. And what's that? Getting under my brother's alpha skin, she replied with surprising candor. Ryan doesn't attach easily. Our upbringing saw to that. When you left, he was changed. Harder, more focused on territory and pack expansion, less on personal connection. I find that hard to believe. We only dated for 5 months. Sometimes it's not about the duration, but the impact. He's different now that you're back. There's a lightness to his scent I haven't picked up in years. I'm not back, Annabel corrected hastily. This is all Ryan's doing. I didn't choose this. Didn't you? Monica challenged. You chose to apply for a position in his home. You chose to bring his pup into his sphere of influence. Perhaps not consciously, but choices were made. Her words hit with uncomfortable precision. What happens now is up to my brother, Monica continued. But I thought you should know that whatever he decides, it will affect more than just the two of you. Children change everything. Ryan doesn't get to decide our future, Annabel said with more conviction than she felt. Grace is my daughter. I've raised her alone for 4 years. And she'll always be your daughter, Monica agreed reasonably. But she's Ryan, too. In our pack, blood means everything. He won't let her go, Annabel. The sooner you accept that, the easier this will be. Is that a threat? Monica's laugh held genuine amusement. Not at all. It's a reality check. My brother is the Alpha King. When he claims something, he gets it. Always. He's not unreasonable, but he is determined. Work with him, not against him, and you might find your new circumstances quite amenable. Before Annabel could respond, a forceful knock sounded at the door. Monica's smile turned knowing. Speak of the Alpha. Annabel opened the door to find Ryan dressed impeccably in a tailored gray suit. His expression darkened when he spotted his sister. Monica, he said, his voice deceptively mild. I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled this morning. We didn't, she replied smoothly. I thought I'd introduce myself to Annabel, get to know the mother of my niece. And have you, Ryan asked, his eyes never leaving his sister's face. Gotten to know her. We've had a lovely chat. Monica moved toward the door, pausing to kiss her brother's cheek. She's exactly as you described, stubborn, principled, protective. She glanced back at Annabel. I think she'll do nicely. With that cryptic pronouncement, she departed. I apologize for my sister, Ryan said after a moment. She can be intrusive. She's protective of you, Annabel observed. She wanted to see if I was a threat. A faint smile curved his lips. And are you? Not in the way she thinks, but I won't be a pawn in whatever pack game you're playing, Ryan. No game, he assured her, moving closer. Just breakfast. I thought we could take Grace to the garden terrace. It's beautiful after a storm. Normalcy, Annabel scoffed. Yes, Annabel. The meal traditionally consumed in the morning. I thought we could start small. Build some normalcy. A truce, Annabel agreed reluctantly. But this doesn't resolve anything. One day at a time, Annabel, he murmured, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. That's all I'm asking for right now. Chapter 8. The Vulnerable Alpha. Breakfast in the garden terrace was surreal in its normalcy. Grace, delighted by the novelty of dining outdoors, chatted happily about the butterflies and squirrels visiting the nearby flowers. Ryan listened to her every word with rapt attention, drawing her out, learning about his pup with the focus he typically reserved for territorial matters. Mr. Dom, do you have to be the Alpha King today? Grace asked, pushing a piece of pancake around her plate. I'm afraid so, Princess, he replied, his expression genuinely regretful. But not until this afternoon. Until then, I'm all yours. Can we go swimming? You said you have a pool. Ryan glanced at Annabel, silently seeking permission. Annabel hesitated, then nodded slightly. Denying Grace simple pleasures out of spite would only hurt the pup. I think that can be arranged, he said, pulling out his phone. By the time we finish breakfast, there will be several swimsuits for you to choose from. Annabel bit her tongue, resisting the urge to comment on the casual display of alpha wealth. This was the world Ryan inhabited, a world where desires were fulfilled with a text message, and obstacles disappeared with the application of money and influence. A world that was now, by extension, Grace's birthright. Later, at the Olympic-sized indoor pool complex, Annabel pulled on her old one-piece swimsuit. a small act of human defiance against the expensive choices Ryan had provided. Ryan raised an eyebrow when he saw her but made no comment. He'd changed into swim trunks and a fitted t-shirt that did little to disguise the powerful shifter physique beneath. "Stay in the shallow area," Annabel warned Grace. "You don't know how to swim yet." "I've arranged for a beta instructor," Ryan said quietly beside her. "Starting tomorrow, if that's acceptable to you." "Yes, that's fine, thank you." Ryan emerged from the pool after several laps, water streaming down his torso, and made his way toward them. "Would you like me to hold you in the water, Grace?" he offered, "so you can feel what it's like to float." Grace nodded eagerly. He lifted her carefully, supporting her small body as she lay back in the water. "Relax," he instructed gently, his voice carrying the low, comforting rumble of an alpha protecting his own. "The water will hold you up if you don't fight it." The sight of them together, Alpha and Pup sharing this moment of trust, created a lump in Annabel's throat. This was the cost of her flight. 4 years of moments like this, lost forever. "Your turn," Ryan said, settling Grace on the pool steps. "Come to the deep end with me. You look like you could use a proper swim. You're wound so tight you might snap." "I'm fine here," Annabel replied, unwilling to follow him into deeper waters, literally and metaphorically. 5 minutes, just to the other end and back. I'll race you." The challenge in his eyes, playful rather than demanding, reminded Annabel of the man she'd first met. "Fine," Annabel conceded. The cool water enveloped her, washing away the human tension. She found her rhythm quickly, muscle memory returning with each stroke. Ryan pulled ahead easily, his shifter strength giving him an undeniable advantage. But Annabel pushed herself harder, focusing on form. We reached the far wall almost simultaneously. "You're still good," Ryan observed as they caught their breath. "You should have pursued it. You have natural talent." "Life had other plans," Annabel replied, glancing toward Grace, who waved cheerfully. "Life or me?" he asked quietly. Before Annabel could answer, a discreet cough drew their attention to the pool entrance, where his beta stood waiting. "Mr. Miles, your associates have arrived early for the council meeting. They're waiting in your office." Ryan's expression shifted instantly, the relaxed openness vanishing behind the cold, detached mask of the Alpha King. "Tell them I'll be with them in 15 minutes. He turned back to Annabel. "I need to go, business that can't wait." "Of course," Annabel replied neutrally. "Grace and I will be fine." He hauled himself out of the pool, then offered her his hand. Annabel accepted it, allowing him to pull her from the water. His grip lingered a moment longer than necessary. "Tonight," he said suddenly. "Dinner, just the 3 of us. 7 o'clock in the private dining room." "We'll be there," Annabel agreed. "Now go, your associates are waiting." A shadow crossed his face at her deliberate choice of words. "You're never going to let it go, are you? What you saw that night?" "Would you?" Annabel challenged. He considered this seriously, then shook his head. "No, I wouldn't, but I would listen if you tried to explain." With that, he departed. Chapter 9. The Negotiation of Trust. That night, dinner was surprisingly casual. A gourmet version of child-friendly foods served family-style in the smaller private dining room. Grace, delighted by the intimacy, chatted happily. "Mr. Dom, do you have to be the Alpha King?" she asked. "I'm afraid so, Princess," he replied. "And then the dragon said, 'I don't want to burn the village, but they won't let me play with them,'" Grace explained, recounting a story she'd invented. "So the princess took him to her castle instead, and they had ice cream." "A wise princess," Ryan observed solemnly. "Sometimes all a dragon needs is a friend, or a family." His eyes met Annabel's over Grace's head. As the hour grew late, Grace's eyelids began to droop. "I think it's someone's bedtime," Annabel said gently. "Can Daddy finish the story after my bath?" Grace murmured sleepily. The word Daddy falling from her lips with such natural ease stopped Annabel's heart. Ryan's expression, a mixture of surprise, joy, and fierce possessiveness, nearly broke Annabel's heart. "Of course I can, Princess," he assured her, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll wait right here." In the sitting room, after Grace was asleep, Ryan stood motionless, his back to Annabel, his shoulders rigid with tension. "She's never said that to anyone but me," Annabel said quietly. He turned slowly to face her. "Thank you," he said simply, "for raising her to be capable of such love, for keeping her safe all these years." "She's easy to love," Annabel replied. "Like her mother." The words were so soft, Annabel almost missed them. "We need to talk, Ryan," Annabel said finally. "Really talk about the past, about that night, about what happens now." He poured himself a whiskey. "No, thank you," Annabel declined. "The night you saw what you saw," he began without preamble. "That beta, Torvin, was a trafficker. He'd broken an agreement with me, using my pack, territory, and reputation to move young Omegas across the country. I was enforcing justice." "What happened to the Omegas?" "I got them out, got them care, safe transport, and away from my pack's influence." Ryan took a sip of his whiskey. "And Torvin, he never violated the Alpha Code again." "So you think your code justifies all of it?" Annabel challenged. "It doesn't absolve me of anything," he replied, surprising her with his candor. "But it lets me sleep at night, because I know I protect the pack and I protect the innocent. I don't deal in drugs that kill. I don't kill innocent people. I have a code." "And what exactly is your position, Ryan?" Annabel asked directly. "What do you call what you do?" "Officially, I'm the Alpha King with diverse interests. Shipping, real estate, private security. Unofficially, I maintain order in a world that operates outside conventional law. I enforce agreements that can't be enforced in human courts. But none of that touches our pup, Annabel. None of it ever will." "How can you promise that? How can you compartmentalize your life so neatly?" "Because I've been doing it my entire adult life. My father built this empire. He ruled through fear alone, a true rogue monster who enjoyed causing pain. I took his position, but I dismantled his methods. I changed what I could." His eyes met hers, intense and unwavering. "And I swore that if I ever had a pup, they would never know the fear that defined my childhood." "Is that why you reacted so strongly when you found out about Grace? Because you felt I denied you the chance to be a different kind of father than yours was?" "Partly," he acknowledged, "but mostly because she's mine, Annabel. My blood, my responsibility, my legacy." "And what about me?" Annabel asked quietly. "Where do I fit in this legacy you're building?" He stood, moving to kneel before her chair. "You're the mother of my pup. You're the woman who's haunted me for 5 years. The only woman who's ever walked away from me." His hand lifted, hovering near her face. "Your heart, your trust, things I had once and lost." "You never had my trust," Annabel countered. "Not really. I didn't know who you were." "You knew the parts of me that mattered, the parts that loved you." "And now, what do you want from me now, Ryan?" "Everything," he said simply. "But I'll settle for a chance to be Grace's father, a chance to show you who I've become." "And if I say no, if all I'm willing to give you is co-parenting?" His jaw tightened, but he nodded slowly. "Then that's what we'll have. I won't force anything on you, but I won't stop hopping either." Before Annabel could answer, a piercing scream shattered the moment. "Grace!" Ryan was faster, bursting into the room ahead of her, his body instinctively positioning itself between potential threat and his family. There was no intruder, only Grace, thrashing in her bed, caught in the throes of a nightmare. "Mama," she cried. "Mama, the bad men are coming." "I'm here, baby, I've got you," Annabel soothed. "It's just a dream." "They were taking you away," she sobbed, "and Daddy couldn't find us." Ryan's expression tightened at her words. "No one is taking your mama anywhere," he assured her, his voice gentle but laced with alpha steel. "And I will always, always find you both, no matter what." Grace's tear-streaked face turned toward him. "Promise," she demanded. "I promise," he vowed with such solemnity that even Annabel believed him. Annabel shifted to one side of the bed, keeping an arm around Grace. Ryan settled on the pup's other side, the three of them forming a protective cocoon. Grace snuggled between them, breathing gradually slowing as she drifted back toward sleep, secure in the knowledge that both her parents were watching over her. "She's never had nightmares about bad men before," Annabel whispered once Grace was asleep. "Children pick up on more than we realize," Ryan replied quietly. "The tension between us, the sudden change in her circumstances, she's processing it in her own way, or she's sensing the danger of my world." "I never wanted this life for her," Annabel whispered. "A life where she needed an alpha king to protect her." "I can never be just a father, Annabel," Ryan said with brutal honesty. "But I can be a good one. I can give her everything she needs. Safety, opportunity, love." His eyes met hers across their sleeping pup. "I can give you those things too, if you'll let me." Annabel found herself returning the pressure of his fingers, accepting the connection, however tentative. "One day at a time," she agreed softly. Epilogue. 6 months later. The scent of cinnamon and polished oak now defined the alpha wing, a warm, safe blend that settled into Annabel's bones. She stood at the window of what was now truly their suite, watching Grace splash in the sprawling outdoor pool under the watchful eye of her beta swimming instructor. In half a year, Grace's innate pup strength had progressed, evident in her smooth, powerful strokes that far exceeded a typical 5-year-old human. "She's getting good," Ryan observed, coming to stand beside her. His arm slipped around her waist with casual intimacy, a contact that had once seemed impossible, but was now the foundation of their new normalcy. "Let's not push her," Annabel cautioned. "No pushing," he agreed, his hand covering hers where it rested on her waist. "Just opportunities when she's ready." 6 months of careful negotiation, of boundaries gradually softening, of trust slowly rebuilt through consistent actions rather than empty promises. They weren't where they had been 5 years ago, but they'd found a new equilibrium. Parents first, alpha and mate second. Ryan had kept his word. His pack business, the darker aspects of his alpha duties, never touched their daily life. The security remained, discreet but ever-present, a constant reminder of the reality they lived in, but one Annabel had learned to accept for the safety it provided. For her own sake, she had insisted on returning to university to complete her degree, and Ryan had supported it fully. "Penny for your thoughts?" Ryan asked, breaking into her reverie. "I was thinking about how far we've come," Annabel admitted, turning to face him. "How different things are from what I expected when you found us." "Better or worse?" he asked, a hint of vulnerability beneath the casual question. "Different," Annabel repeated. "Better in some ways, more complicated in others, but I'm glad Grace has her alpha father. And I'm glad we found our way back to each other, even if it's not the same as before." His hand covered hers, pressing her palm more firmly against his cheek. "It's better than before. Before we had secrets. Now we have truth." "I tried to stop loving you," Annabel confessed honestly. "I told myself I'd imagine the good parts, but every time I looked at Grace, I saw you, not just in her features, but in her spirit, in her fierce loyalty." His arms tightened around her. "I never stopped loving you," he confessed, his voice low and intense, thick with the pheromones of his deep, primal feeling. Annabel reached up, tracing the sharp line of his jaw. "I feel like I'm finally seeing all of you," she said softly. "The gentle father and the ruthless alpha. The man who reads bedtime stories and the king who protects what's his at any cost. And I'm starting to understand that they're all parts of the same whole. And you can accept that, all of me." The question was weighted with months of restraint. "Yes," Annabel said finally, the word both an ending and a beginning. "I can accept all of you, I do." The tension drained from his body, his forehead coming to rest against hers in a gesture of profound, alpha relief. "I've waited 5 years to hear you say that." His lips found hers, gentle at first, then with growing, powerful intensity. 5 years of separation, longing, and rediscovery channeled into a kiss that promised everything words couldn't express. "Mama, Daddy, watch me dive," Grace's voice called from the pool below, breaking the moment. They turned together to the window, watching as their pup executed a powerful, if somewhat wobbly, dive into the deep end, emerging with a triumphant grin. Ryan's arm remained around Annabel's waist, her head finding the perfect resting place against his shoulder. A family, a human mate and her alpha king, united by a love that had survived secrets, separation, and the slow, painstaking work of rebuilding trust. "She's fearless," Ryan observed proudly. "Not fearless," Annabel corrected with a smile. "Brave, there's a difference." "Like her mother," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Like both her parents," Annabel amended. The Alpha King's maid and their secret pup had become something else entirely. A family, unconventional, but unbreakable, bound by love stronger than fear, stronger than the past, stronger than the dangers that might still lie ahead. And in that moment, watching Grace wave to them with pure joy, Annabel knew she wouldn't have it any other way. If you loved this story, prove it. I put hours into bringing these stories to life. It takes 2 seconds to subscribe and tell me where you're watching from. Don't leave me hanging, please.